Right, so as promised, it's time to start doing this little truss roof here that's got a hipped gable end on the front. Hopefully I'm going to be able to talk you through how I set it out, which I think is the sort of key to these hipped gable ends or barn ends. So we've got the trusses up, I'm going to get up there, start setting out, putting some of these trusses in, and then hopefully better talk through how I set this out. So we're making a start on this roof, and it's got a plate down one side, but the other side is going up to the original gable end. So what we've had to do is cut hangers in, as you can see there. I've got a couple of golden rules when it comes to carpentry, and I think the number one rule is don't work in the rain. I don't know how I've managed to be sweet talked into doing this, but it's absolutely tipping it down. So we'll put most of the expensive tools away, and we're just going to try and stand as many of these trusses in these shoes, get them braced up, and we'll see what the weather does for the rest of the day. You've got to laugh, haven't you? So we've stood all these trusses on. It's tipping it down with rain. I would have liked to have shown you some time lapse of me putting it on, because we put them on hangers on that side, but it's absolutely tipping it down. I never normally work in the rain, as I already said, and I blame this on Dan Cox, because the guy that I'm doing the roof for watched you, Dan, working in the rain, so he said, well, if Dan can do it, why can't you? So here I am, soaking wet. Right, everyone, finally got to the point where I can hopefully try and explain a little bit. I'm in this roof here. It's got a little hipped gable end on it. Have a quick look at the plans here. We can see this is a trussed roof. What I'm going to do is show you how I find the plate height relative to where the hip starts. Now, there's a couple of things that dictate the hipped gable end, and they're either going to be the plate height or where the ridges meet, where the ridge meets the hips. This, of course, is making the assumptions that this is a equal pitched hip roof, so the hips will be at 45 degrees. So basically, I always struggle to set these out, and the penny finally dropped a few years ago. And what I basically do is use the truss I've got here, or if it was a hand-cut roof, it'd be exactly the same. Get your last common trusses or common rafters up. And I've looked at the drawing here, and what I've done, if you can just see here, is we know the distance that this first double is back, which is basically the point, as you can see here, that the hips meet the ridge. So we know what that measurement is. So once we know that measurement, and obviously we know what the pitch of the roof is, we can work out the height of the plate. So I've roughly scaled off here. We can't do all of this to scale because it just wouldn't work, and it's best to do it direct to measure. So I've scaled off the drawing here between the face of this double and the face and the inside face of the blockwork, and that measurement here is 1362. Now simply all I do is plumb down. I put this piece of timber in here to help us mark out. I plumb down from the ridge, I put a centre line, so this becomes the centre point of the centre line of our roof in terms of the sort of mathematical centre point. There's my 1362, and what I've done, because what I'm trying to do is get a mark down on this rafter to eventually give us a bird's mouth, which gives us a plate height, which we can then transfer across for the bricklayer to use. So I've got my 1362. Now what's really important here is to add on half the thickness of your truss material, which in this case is 35. So I've had to add on 17.5. I've added on 17 mil. This is important because when you turn from this plane to this one, the centre line of the roof isn't here. The centre line of the roof is actually here, is halfway back in this, the thickness of this truss material. So 1362, which is my setback from the face of this set of trusses here to my blockwork, plus the 17 mil, because we're turning 90 degrees. We're setting this out in one plane, but we're actually, we're measuring it in one plane, but we're setting out in another. So as I said, we have to allow for half the thickness of this material. So 1362 plus 17, and then what I've done, that's 1379, is add on another 100 mil. So we're going to the outside of the plate, which is where we mark, obviously, our bird's mouth from. So we've got this plumb line here. What I've done is taken a tape measure from here, and I've measured out. This is that mark here, whatever we said that was, 1479. So this now represents the outside of the plate. And what I've done is just cut a little dummy bit of plate here, and I'll just quickly nail that on, and then I'll show you. It's a simple case then of levelling that mark across to give the plate height. So I know this is all a bit tight because I've only got a couple of scaffold boards to stand on. So we've got that measurement now, and as I said, I've put that mark on here. So all we need to do now is get our height above plate, which this is always dependent on what size rafters you're using. The rafters I'm using are 4x2 in this case. These are only 72mm, so I'm happy that my height above plate would leave 72mm of the rafter on, which gives us quite a nice little bird's mouth here. So that means that I can, once I've got my height above plate, I can put this little level line in here, which is actually the plate level. And then what I do is run my level from this mark, and I give a mark for the bricklayers over there, which is what I've done, and they put the plate in. I'll just put the level on there and show you. So as you can see, look, I've just put the level. It's not sitting on there fantastically flat, it's because I've just nailed it through a gang plate. But I've put the level on that little dummy bit of plate there, and as you can see, it's now sitting on the plate that the bricklayers put in for me, and as you can see there, look, it's perfectly level. So that's really cool. I hope I've made a reasonable job of explaining that it's not that difficult, and I basically used the last set of common trusses. If this was a cut roof, you could possibly do this on the floor. Just make up your common rafters as you would, make them up into a triangle, and pretty much you could just do this off a centre line. You wouldn't need to level it, you could just do it off a centre line. And then make sure that when you put the measurement from the face side of your last set of commons back to the block work, that you add on half the material, because this is the centre line in one plane, but you're turning it 90 degrees when the centre line becomes down the side. So now the bricklayers have put the plate on for me. What we can basically do, and I can show you here, is I've actually cut a rafter which is fitting perfectly in here, and I'll show you that that rafter actually mirrors straight on top of this rafter here, but we have to take that 17.5mm, or that 17mm, we have to take it back off for the thickness of the rafter material. As you can see, what I basically did, the way I got this rafter here was actually just physically measured it off those marks we already put on. As you can see, it's now sat on, it's sat nicely. It's not, it's all a little bit loose here, but that is now sat nicely onto this bit of plate. And as you can see, it runs all the way up to the top. But when it gets to the top, it obviously finishes this 17mm short, because obviously, as I said, you couldn't have it right to the centre line, because when you turned it around 90 degrees, it would want to come back to the centre of the true centre line of the roof. So we've had to take that 17mm off, which again is the thickness of the truss material. So that's why I set this rafter out off this marking, and when we turn it 90 degrees, as you saw, it fitted perfectly. Now, the reason I don't set these out on the floor is because, as you can see here, we've got a bit of discrepancy. We've had to pull this plate this way a little bit because the block work has lent out maybe 10mm. So if we'd have cut all this on the floor, it potentially wouldn't have fitted. So we're just going to, that's one of the sort of reasons here in the UK that we sort of direct measure everything, because with the best will in the world, you know, there's a certain degree of tolerance in the building, and we have to accommodate that. So the next job I've got to do is find the centre line. We need to get the centre line of this roof so that we can strike down this end common. And what I'm going to do easily here is I've just run a level across the top of the roof there, and a level across the top of the roof here, and then just split that down the centre. If this was maybe a hand cut roof, what I would do is take this centre line down to the ceiling cord, measure back to the plate, go back to the end of the wall, take that measurement up to the wall, and then just plumb a line up. So that's what I'm going to do, and I can actually start to get this hip end filled in. I hope I haven't made too much of a hash of explaining it. It is quite simple, and it's something that makes setting these out really, really easy. And once you get it set out, it's pretty much just simple hip cutting carpentry. So get this end common in, and I can then mark out my hips. So I think what I was trying to explain is, in effect, we're using the truss as a giant rod or pattern to take our marks off, and I find it really, really easy to then be able to set out your plate height. Now, if it was the other way round, say for instance, and your plate height was in first, you just do the opposite. You would just take the measurement of from your ceiling line up to your plate, transfer it onto your pattern truss or common rafters, and then put that line across it, and then literally it's a simple case of doing it in reverse. Find out what you want your height above plate, and then what that will do is it'll give you a measurement back to the centre, which is your setback. I hope I've made a reasonable job of explaining that. I'm going to get on with this now. I've done a bit more setting out. I've got my marks, which are on the top side of the roof either side. I've divided that by 2, which has got me a centre mark here. Obviously I've come 17.5 mm either side of that, which is where my rafter goes. But now what we need to do is mark out where basically the roof turns, because what we're essentially doing is we're making a little mini roof on top of this gable end. So I've got my centre mark here, and now what we do is we go back to that. Let me just see it up there, can I zoom in? We go back to that 1479 mark, which is the mark which is from that centre line to the outside of the plate. So we need to come back to that measurement and mark from this centre line here, 1479 out to here. Now what this is the actual outside of the plate. If this was like a little hipped end on its own, the plate would then return back down there, and then what we can do from here is put our 45-degree mark. So this is actually the intersecting point of the 2 roofs, of where the roofs turn. And what I've done, just to double check, is push my line through into here and plumbed up, and that is our height above plate, which exactly matches the height above plate over there. So simply all we can do now is, I'm probably going to put a splayed cut on this hip here, but if you didn't want to, because this is bricked in and not timber work, if it was stud work I'd run that right through. But actually maybe what I will, I don't know yet, but basically what you could do if you wanted to do is you could cut that off, and then we could just nip the corner of this off at 35 millimetres, and then you could just put it'd be like a normal hip, you know, in terms of the plumb cut in the seat cut. I'm probably going to put a splayed cut in there anyway. So yeah, it's pretty simple. We just go back to the measurement that we used earlier from that centre line out to the outside of the plate, and we just measure that from our centre line here. And then what we've got is that nice, you know, the square. If this was a hipped end sat on top of the gable wall, the plates would run all the way around and back, and we know that the hips will be in at 45 degrees. So we've just got that end common up, and look, the sun's come out. So I'm going to get that nailed up at the top, and then I can start set up a little block so that I can cut these rafter tails off to start getting those hips in. Right, so I've just finished marking out this corner. It's exactly the same as I did in one of my videos where I showed you how I set out and mark a hip. So I've got a height above plate block here, which I've put a string line to the left hand corner, because the left hand side is the side that will be cutting these rafter tails off, because obviously they fit on the left hand side of the hip. Done the same up at the top, and again, it's all in that other video I did, but offset the line, the thickness of the hip material, and pulled my line up there, and then I'll mark these rafters, cut them off plumb, and then I can take some measurements and put my cuts onto the hip, and hopefully see how that drops in. Right, that's those rafter tails cut off. We'll get onto the hip now. Up and down, it's like a kid on a climbing frame all day. Right, up we go. Put a little block in the top where the 2 rafters meet. I can hook my tape in and and get the measurements for the hip. Got my measurements to start cutting that hip now. Well, I've cut the hip. Let's put it in, see if it goes in first time. Moment of truth. Let's have a look. Bolster. Just, you know, the block work drifted out a little bit, so obviously the plate's stepped in slightly, so it's just going to catch its block work. Looking good. What do we need here? Tiny bit. Oh, really good. Oh, it's pretty good. Man, just a tiny bit off this brickwork. I'm not going to touch that brickwork. It was only done yesterday. It's green, so I think I'll just take a bit out the bottom here. This is cut off flush anyway. We've got a flush barge detail here, so I'll just nip that out. Don't want to touch too much of that brickwork. Looking good though. Right, I'll just nip that little bit out for that brickwork. Let's try it, and it looked pretty good first time actually, so if it fits nice now, I'm just going to put a tack in it and move on to the other one. That's really sweet. Right. I spoke too soon. I think it's a tiny bit too long. You only got to get a couple of mil out on these, and they do sort of stick up, makes it look worse than it is. So I'm literally thinking I'm going to just reduce that down by maybe 5 mil, and then where that hip meets those two rafters at the top, it should be absolutely perfect. Right. I'm going to go up there and have a quick look. Yeah, just knock 5 mil off. It's quite usual actually. So if you're lucky, the hip's going first time, but sometimes they need a little bit of teasing. Yeah, I've just laid this hip down here to cut it, as I was saying, and really you take it off the plumb cut end. Obviously, we're not going to mess about recutting the bottom. Literally, look at that. It's only maybe 5 mil, and that's all I need to take off, and that will make this hip look like it was sat up miles, but you really only need to take a tiny bit off, and that will drop that down perfectly. So I'll just do that, and we'll try it back in. Right, I've recut it. Hopefully it'll drop in perfect now. Get it nailed up, and then it's time for a cup of tea. It's lush, really satisfying. I really enjoy roofing, and when things like this drop in, it's really satisfying. Got some great lines through there now. Lovely. Just put one tack in it for now, and then I'll nail it up when I get the nail gun out. So nail the top as well. That's lush. Tap these in. Come on. So excited. Can't even hit the nails in. More tack in there. Beautiful. Really happy with that. Let's have a quick look. So, let me zoom right. So as you can see here, I'm just going up. Hip's gone in really nicely, look at those. So yeah, you can see they fit really nicely at the top here. All these points come together. The plumb cuts are lovely. And as we come down, it intersects really nicely with these rafter tails that I cut. As you can see, look, actually they're fitting really well here. Again, these trusses, really they're kind of built to a certain tolerance, and sometimes they're up and down a little bit, but they fitted really nice here. And then as we go down onto the plate, you can see it fits nice. I'm just trying to lean over here without falling off. Fits nicely down onto the plate, and we've got that lovely splayed plumb cut in the bird's mouth there. I also reduced the tail of the hip down to 100mm, which is the same as the rafter here. So yeah, really happy. You can see taking that bit of time to set it out the way I did, and once you get all your measurements right, this will run in just like a normal hip. I know you can see that we've got the block work has drifted out a little bit here, and I know it would be really tempting to just keep the plate over the block work, but as soon as you do that, as soon as you come away from your marking out or your setting out, especially in roofing, excuse me Sniffy, it's a cold morning, as soon as you come away from your setting out points, you're going to get yourself in all kinds of trouble, because as you move further out, you have to adjust the height above plate and the rafters, and none of it would work right. So it might seem like we shouldn't be putting the plate in, but ultimately there's still a fantastic bearing on that plate, and the plate has got a fantastic bearing onto the block work. So it's just one of those things we have to deal with. Certainly here in the UK, we have to deal with the discrepancies and tolerances that we find. So, it's a real sniff there, sorry. So I'm really happy with that, and infilling the rest of this now is just easy hip filling stuff, and all I've got to do now is repeat it down on the other side, and that'll be looking really good. So as you can see, by using my last common truss set, or if you were doing a hand cut, it would be exactly the same. By using that as a giant sort of marking out rod, what I've been able to do is give the bricklayers an accurate plate height, which has been set, and what that's enabled me to do is cut that hip in beautifully, and it'll all line through, and when I get the other hip in, I'll get the camera up here and you can see how this hip, the end common rafter and the other hip will all come through in the same line. So I hope that I've made a reasonable job of explaining that. In my mind, I'd been thinking about all the things I was going to do when I was explaining it, but sometimes when you get on site, it's much different. You've got other things come into the equation, like the weather and bricklayers and pressure, and everyone wants to get on. So I'm going to have a cup of tea now, and then I'll get that other hip cut in, and we can start to get this end finished. Woo-hoo-hoo! Nice. Let's see if that fits. That's that other hip cut. The sun's come out. They say the sun shines on the righteous. So let's see if this hip fits righteously in the hole that we prepared for it. Fingers crossed this time, first time. Here we go. Here we go. Hold it. Why is it? Because peak too early. We've got that brick in the way. What else? We're just going to have to knock a bit of this, aren't we? Wasn't ready at all, was I? Some of this block work off. That's a long way out here. Oh my gosh. Don't watch. Don't watch, it's too painful. Too much, is it? Right. Think. Sure it's going to hit that brick. Let's have a look, here we go. Yes! Oh, it's lush. It's lush. Look at that. So cool. Yes. Oh, yes. Beautiful, straight up. Happy days, absolutely brilliant. So get that nailed in and we can move on. Can you see that? Is that, have I got a good angle there? Yeah, not too bad. Right, get that nailed up. Here we go. Oh yeah, really good up here. Best view in the house. Superb. Absolutely brilliant. Straight. Bad. Lovely. Couple more nails there. Fitting really nicely on these trusses. Quite well made, this truss. Quite well made, this roof. Oh, lovely. Only a few mil down. Lovely. That's absolutely superb. Thrilled to bits with that. Excellent. So we can just infill along this front now, get the nail gun out, nail the whole lot up, cut the rafter feet off, put a barge and fascia on. Job done. Happy, really happy with that. Superb. Let's come down this way. Yes. You see my backside coming down there? Yeah, let's just have a quick scan here. Look, unclip it. Here we go. yeah, really pleased with how that's gone. When we look, let's just, if we can look through this plane here of these hips, can we just see that? If I move the camera down, see how they, both the hips and that end common rafter fit in all down in the same plane beautifully. So all of these trusses quite well manufactured actually, because they all strike nicely on the hip there. We've got lovely cuts down. I can't quite see there. Excuse, I know we said that the plate had to sail quite a lot over the blockwork, but this blockwork has drifted, like I said. But we've got some lovely cuts there. Nice splay cut on the end there as well. Look, that's nice and tight. So yeah, really happy with that. The cuts at the top are really lovely. Let's go and have a quick look at those up there for a treat. Yeah, so we'll have a quick climb up here. Here we go. So yeah, if you can see, look at the top. I'm right now in shadow now. Looking at the top here, look, you see all of these hips come together really nicely around this end common. So really pleased with that. And as I said earlier, it would be really tempting to just leave that plate over the blockwork, but then we come away from our setting point. And as you can see how lovely this has all gone together, if I'd have pushed that plate over the blockwork, what's that, 15 mil over, we'd have ended up getting a right old mess. None of this would have met where it's supposed to. So yeah, as tempting as it is to go with the blockwork, you have to stick with your setting out points. So really happy with that, and the sun's out as well. So this line here, basically, if this was just a straight hipped roof, this would be the outside edge of the plate as it returned back that way along the main run of the roof. So I know I've cut a splayed cut here, but as you can see, so this is the outside edge of the plate. Therefore, when we level across to here, this is then our height above plate, which is 90 mil in this instance. So as you see, as we go round, as we turn 90 degrees along, this would be the main run of the roof. We hit the point that we would normally cut the 45. We've normally cut this off here in the UK, but I've done a splayed cut, so I haven't. Then we go up 90 mil height above plate to the top of the hip, and then across square. And as you see here, look, then we go 90 mil back down, so that's maintaining the height above plate, and that comes to the outside edge of the hip plate. So as you can see, you maintain, this is the external edge of the plate. So where it hits the hip is then 90 mil above it to the height above plate to the top of the hip rafter, then square across, 90 mil back down, and then, as I said, that would then continue being the outside edge of the plate there, and these rafters would then have the 90 mil height above plate, which is the same as all of these. So yeah, I hope you can get your head around it. It can seem confusing, but once you get it straight in your mind, it's actually quite easy. And as you can see here, this basically confirms my setting out method as being accurate from what we did earlier, because all of this fits really, really nicely. And obviously, in all the excitement of, you know, the sun came out and it was all fitting really, really nicely, and filming as well, I actually forgot that to cut this this excess bit of plate off. So I've made a bit of a rod from my own back here now, so I'll probably just get the multi-tool and chop that back in there. So just wanted to say, this way of measuring out, it's and together with the fact the trusses are quite good, it was so accurate that these hips, the difference in these hips was only 5 millimeters. So, you know, really, really happy with how this has turned out. So I'm just going to infill that bit. I'll probably put it on some time lapse just to show me buzzing that through, because to be honest, this video is not so much about infilling hips, it's about setting out hips gable ends. I'm going to have to take my coat off because it's been a funny week. Horrific rain and blowing a gale and cold at the beginning of the week. Here we are halfway through the week now, and it's getting hot, so really, really good. So I'll set up some time lapse and just whiz these last few in, and then we can move on to the next part of this roof. Absolutely brilliant. Thrilled to get to that. Let's have a quick look. I'll just show you. We can see now I've got those rafters in. Just pan it across the top plane. You can see how they all nice and lined in across there. Absolutely fantastic. So yeah, really pleased that's that done really. You've just got to nail it up, as I said. All of these cuts look nice up here. Everything's fitting really nicely. Hang on. So that's about it, showing me how I cut and set out this hipped gable end. I hope that I've done a reasonable job of explaining it. It's always easier in your mind when you're thinking about what you're going to say than when you actually get on site. I hope I haven't missed any bits out, and I hope that it does make sense. If this is the sort of thing you're going to be attempting to do, no doubt you'll be a reasonably competent roofer already. So I hope you can understand, you know, my theory and the way that I set these out. So this has been a really interesting job. We're not finished yet, but I hope you've found it interesting, and thanks for watching.